Hi everybody, Paul Cameron here from speedupmyjobsearch.com and Drive staff as well as the JDNG group. I facilitate a job club in Wheaton every month, every third Thursday from 12:10 to 12:50. The Jobs Driven Networking Group is why we call it the JDNG group. And this last month at our most recent meeting, the audio from the video didn't really come out real well. I think the channel got mixed up on the microphone and it just didn't record. So I've enhanced it enough from an additional recorder to be able to be usable so you can hear the speaker, but the introduction didn't come out real clear. And for this particular meeting, that's really important because this meeting, just very personally, this is a meeting I'm going to remember for the rest of my life, sincerely. And hopefully that's another 4 or 5 decades from now, but I'll remember it all that time because this was a major turning point for me and a very reaffirming, faith-affirming moment for me as well. One of my favorite quotes is by Einstein, where he said that coincidences are just God's way of staying anonymous, right? So I want to share with you the story that led to this meeting because it really was an amazing circumstance that this even happened, and then we'll cut over to Janet and her meeting. So this started when I was in college, and it was Easter Sunday Eve, if that's a thing. So the night before Easter, and my roommate, eventual roommate and good friend at the time, we decided to go to his hometown, Jerseyville, Illinois. If you're not familiar, don't worry. Not many people are. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. No disrespect to the few people in Jerseyville down there, but it's his hometown, and he went to go see his girlfriend of a long time, and they had set me up with somebody that weekend, and we went out for just nice double date kind of evening, and we're both college athletes. I played on the football team. He was a college wrestler, so we weren't drinkers or anything. We just went out for a nice time, and on the way home. And it was early morning at that point, probably somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning. We were heading home down one of those little rural route, 50-mile-an-hour highways you see out in the country. And as we approached the base of a hill, a drunk driver came over the top of the hill on our side of the road. And I tried to swerve out of the way. I was driving at the time. You'll see on the screen here next to me the truck that I was driving at that time. I tried to swerve out of the way, but we were going over a little creek at the time, and there were guardrails on the side of the road, so I couldn't swerve out of the way. And we ended up colliding. The drunk driver hit us head on, driver side to driver side. Both vehicles were going about 80 miles an hour, and nobody was wearing seatbelts. Needless to say, it was a pretty horrific wreck. The back end of my truck, the back 2 wheels there, came to rest on top of the guardrails, if that gives you any idea of how hard we hit for that to happen. Now, we were out in the middle of nowhere, right? We're out in the middle of the sticks. The chances of another car coming down that road between 1 and 2 in the morning on Easter Sunday morning were very, very slim. But as luck would have it, someone did come down the road, and fortunately, as well, this person who came down the road was young enough and strong enough and caring enough to be willing to stop, run up to the vehicles that were still burning, and pick me up, all of my, at the time, 235 pounds of just dead weight, football playing body, pick me up out of the truck, carry me across the road, and then lay me on the other side of the road. And as he laid me on the other side of the road, my truck exploded behind him. And you'll see in the pictures here I put up on the screen, you can kind of make out on the inside of my truck there, the steering wheel. They got to the hospital, they called my parents, and they said to my parents that if I lived through the night, which they didn't expect me to, that at best I would be able to feed myself, but I certainly would never walk again. Fast forward the story just a little bit here for the sake of time. Through the grace of a lot of prayers and very good doctors and the love and support of family and friends, I'm here walking, recovered from this. And the good friend who was in the car with me, he broke a nose and a vertebrae in his back, is now a pastor of a church in Indiana. At the time I had broken, both of my legs, and my jaw was in 7 pieces, and I cracked the back of my skull. On the way to the hospital, when they had me in a helicopter, I actually flatlined twice. And it was just, like I say, it was a difficult time. But in the months before I could walk, but while I was in the hospital and getting out of the hospital for many, many months, I was stuck in a bed. And to get me through it, for whatever reason, I got very interested in poetry. And just collecting all these, motivational kind of poems that I could find, and short stories, and I started writing these poems and things. And actually, this is the book here. One of these poems in particular, it was called Risks, which helped me to take some chances and get myself back into doing a lot of the things that I was afraid to do at the time. And I have referred back to that poem many, many times over the course of my life, and taking certain positions and do I marry this person? Do I not? Do we move to that town? Do we not? It just it's been kind of a guiding theme for me throughout my life. It's a big deal. And this past April, I was at one of those crossroads, and when I was trying to decide, do I want to continue with speedupmyjobsearch.com or not? While I love that site, and I have a passion for helping people, and I sincerely love everything about it, it's not something that I'm making a living from, and it was taking so much time away from my recruiting that it was hurting my recruiting business, and it was losing money because I priced the memberships below my cost per member to try to make it affordable so people can join this thing. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to present it to people at this job club and just get their feedback and kind of go with that. I know my steps are being directed, and I know that God's going to be there, and He's going to help me understand what to do. He's going to show me where to go. And I also reached out to this book again and went and found that poem, because this is a major risk that I'm taking, either to continue on or to not. And read through that, and then as I looked through some of the other poems and things and short stories that I had written, it was amazing how many of them had to do with job search. And in college, I didn't even know, recruiting was a thing. I didn't know that was even an industry. I didn't know you could help people go find jobs. That was, I didn't even know anything about it. It was so interesting that before I was aware of it, I was writing about it, which at the time I was saying, wow, maybe this is the right path here for me. And I laid out the situation for everybody at that meeting. There was 22 people there, so it wasn't a huge meeting, but I laid it out for everyone. I even brought the book and explained, that I rely on that particular poem and how many of them were related to job search. And it was a good meeting, and I felt pretty good about things. And as I was cleaning up afterwards, got talking with some people that were there, and a friend who runs another job club out in Plainfield, Janet Rand, she was there, and I just got talking to her about the whole situation, and then it just kind of clicked for me that, that one poem, Risks, that's in here, I don't know who this author was, and I only had a Xerox copy of the poem because it was, this is Easter Sunday of '91. This is 2019 as I'm recording this, and April of 2019 when I had that meeting. So this is 28 years later, and I got talking to her. Janet, you know what? I just realized that poem Risks that's in here that I rely on so heavily, for decades. The person who wrote that has the exact same name as yours. Did you know there's a Janet Rand who writes poems? Amazing. And I looked at her, and her face just kind of dropped, and she just starts pointing at herself, and it was her. She wrote that poem. So here I am trying to decide, is this something I want to do for the rest of my life? And hopefully God's going to show me a plan and show me a way. And the poem that I've been relying on so heavily through so many situations that I pulled out for that particular moment, the author of that poem was one of the 22 people who was in the audience that day. And she's a job search expert. And, I've known her. I've spoken at her club before. She spoke at mine once before. The chances of her being one of those 22 people that day is just insane to me. And beyond explanation. And so after some time of just talking and just the shock of it all, we came back to my office here, and she signed my Xerox copy, which is awesome, of this poem. And she agreed to come back to our Jobs-Driven Networking group and present on a topic of taking risks, which is very appropriate for the job search. So hopefully that makes sense why this meeting is so meaningful and personal to me. And I hope you enjoy it. She starts out this program by reading this poem that she wrote so long ago. This is, I was 91 when I found this thing. She said she wrote it back in the 70s. Amazing. I didn't meet her until just a few years ago. Probably 2016, 2017. Just beyond explanation. So I'm going to stop talking here. I'm going to present this I'll turn this over to Janet. Again, the audio is not perfect. I had to record it from another recording device that was on in the back of the room. So I've enhanced it as much as I could. Hopefully you can understand her well enough. And I'll put the words of the poem up on the screen as she reads it. But it was quite an amazing day. So I hope you enjoy this. Without further ado, here's Janet Rand.
And I talked again after that moment, and I said, what if I do a presentation related to the poem? And he was very happy about that. So I put a short presentation together, and I want to start with the poem. Risk. To laugh is to risk appearing the fool. To weep is to risk appearing sentimental. To reach out to another is to risk involvement. To expose feelings is to risk exposing your true self. To place your ideas, your dreams before the crowd is to risk their loss. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To live is to risk dying. To hope is to risk despair. To try is to risk failure. But risk must be taken because the greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing. The person who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing, is nothing. He may avoid suffering and sorrow, but he simply cannot learn, feel, change, grow, love, live. Chained to his servitude, he is a slave. He has forfeit his freedom. Only a person who risks is free. So how many of you are comfortable taking risks?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Depends on the circumstance. Yeah. But what if I said it's actually a good idea to try it a little more often, to do it simply? And that's what I'm going to be talking about today, ways that you can take risks. How many of you think of a risk as a giant leap? Okay, that's typically what people think. It gets scary if it's a giant leap, isn't it? So we don't want it to be scary. Take one step at a time. That means planning. It means assessing what you need to do so that you are able to move forward with a fair amount of comfort. I would ask you this, is there one small risk you could take today? Have you thought about it?
I came here.
I'm sorry?
I came here.
Okay, good. So you're out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I call that get out of the house. Otherwise we insulate ourselves. But one small risk can change the balance in your life. Let me reflect on something that influenced me when it came to making one small change. Some years ago, in the Oprah magazine, there was a spiral. If you step back, it looked like a unicorn. And around the spiral were lines and boxes, and in each box there was some kind of suggestion of things to do. And one of those suggestions was, change one thing. Now think about carrying a tray. You know, waitresses and waiters do it all the time. When they take one glass or one cup off that tray, it has to rebalance. So you can do the same when you are taking one small step. Have you all been exposed to the different areas of your life? How many of you have stopped and considered these on a regular basis? I understand we're a job club, you're focused on career. And usually with that goes finances. But have you looked at all the other things that create a total picture of what your life is? I'd like you to take a moment to think about steps. Only I have a suggestion. Rather than jumping into a career step, I'd like you to pick a first step that involves being satisfied pretty quickly. Now, up here you have one suggestion, which would be help. Walk for 30 minutes every work day. Notice I said work day, not every day. The reason you want to keep it positive, give yourself a couple of days off. So if you work 4 or 5 days, it's a success. How many of you walk or do some form of exercise at least 3 or 4 days a week? Great. So you feel good about that, right?
Yes.
I'm going to give you another reason why you want to do exercise often during the course of a week. What if I said it reduces anxiety? 30 minutes
yes.
a day reduces anxiety. Why take on the big stuff like looking for a job when we're so anxious? And a little bit of exercise can make it an easier process. The luck factor. I'm beginning to find, as I do the reading that Paul is referring to, that there's a link or threading. Back in the 90s, it was a luck factor. In the early 2000s, it was positivity. And then more recently, we talk about happiness. They've all been around probably 20 years or more, but the fact is we haven't been focusing on them that much. Anyway, Dr. Wiseman, the gentleman that wrote this book, talked about opening up your world. What's your worldview? Is it limited or is it open? Do you allow? I chuckled when Paul was talking about rejection proof. He was talking about this man that went to all different situations and he got lots of no's and he was trying to get used to them. I guess he got so skilled at asking, it turned into a positive for him. Same principle, exact same principle. Now, how many of you think you're lucky? I'm seeing this. How many of you think you might be unlucky? Good.
Yeah.
All right. One of the things that I got out of this book is we create our own luck, but we do that by being open. And one of the things you can do is smile. So one of his assignments was go out into the world and find 4 people or 4 situations where you can smile with folks. First of all, smiling makes us feel good. But how about making others that you cross paths with more open? So it makes you more open, it makes them more open. I've been doing it at the grocery store lately. It's fun.
Yeah.
They look at me like, did she really do that? But they respond, so it works. Here's another one, before happiness. I just finished this one recently. Dr. Sean Aker talks about positive genius. He talks about options. You know, when you're looking for a job, you're usually focused in one direction. How many of you have an option B? A backup plan, something else you can do in the interim? We're in a gig economy. Why not? Right? But you have to prioritize options so that you utilize your time well. One of the things that I liked was his 3-to-1 ratio. You need 3 positives to every 1 negative. Think about how easy it is to get down. So you have to find ways in your day and in your life that will allow you to have more positives. Now, one of the ways to create positives is to step back from a situation and try to find something positive out of it, even if it's a disappointment. And then you need to picture success. All too often we don't create that. I learned many years ago, before I do a presentation, that I have to see myself doing that presentation well. So it's all about finding a way to talk to yourself so that you can create a positive picture. And one of the things that seems to be threading through all the material I've been reading is this concept of focus on strong personal relationships. And we always talk about networking and interviewing, but building relationships needs to be more of a commitment. How many of you have spoken to somebody that you networked with within the last month? And what about somebody you met 3 or 4 months ago? Have you spoken to them? It only requires a 5-minute phone call. So opening yourself up to building personal relationships, and of course, coffee is a great way to do it, or making sure that you have a connection that goes beyond, hello, how are you? So let me tell you my story. The poem Risk came about of a positive, but it started as a negative. I was going through a divorce, and life was really down. So my life was changing completely. And along the way, a friend of mine had gone to the Park District, taken a program in rock climbing. And she said to me, "Try it, I like it."
That's a big step.
Yes, you're talking about taking a risk. It really was a risk. Anyway, I did. I signed up. Only my experience was completely different than hers. First night, we learned how to do ropes. Second night, we went to the firehouse and we climbed the hose tower. I got about 3/4 of the way up the hose tower and I froze. Fortunately, the instructor really understood what was needed, talked me up to the landing, convinced me to belay down. When I got to the bottom, I was in a stupor. It was like shock. I thought, am I really going to do this? Last words he said to me, "Be at the Park District at 5 o'clock in the morning, Saturday." I left. Friday night I went to bed. I woke up Saturday morning and I thought to myself, do I really want to do this? And it was like his voice compelled me. Now I understand he believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And off we went to Savannah, Georgia, the Mississippi Palisades State Park. There was a group of about 16 of us. And we spent both Saturday and Sunday learning to climb rocks. It was an effort to get through the first level, which is about a story high. The second level was a real effort as well. The third one took all that I had. So I made it, and the exhilaration was absolutely phenomenal. I later wrote the poem. And it's a poem that has shown up again and again. It finds me. Just as I had a moment with Paul, there have been several moments like that when it came back into my life. Back in 2010, I got a call from a guy and he asked me to cease using the poem. And I said to him, why would I cease using the poem when I have the copyright? He went, oh. There are a couple of other people who have claimed it as well. It found me back in 1989. I was a sales trainer. I was going to a satellite office of the company I was working with. I walked in and there's this very poor copy of a poem on the wall. I looked at it and I thought, gee, this looks familiar. So I made a copy, took it home. Couldn't find my paperwork. It took me a couple of days and I found it. And when I looked at it, I knew it was mine because I'd already made a change to that poem. It had a word in there. If you remember, I used the word servitude. The original word that I used was servitude. That was the first time it found me. That was about 10 years later. And I've had several events at approximately 10-year intervals. So I'm hoping for another one in 10 years. Anyway, let me move on because I want to find out what your story is. So I noticed most of you are taking notes. I'd like you to imagine for a moment what's your story. I put up visuals here just for you to stop and think for a moment. What's the future? What are your alternatives? What's your backup plan? How many of you have thought of that? Take a moment, jot down some notes. Doesn't have to be long sentences. You can just remind yourself with a couple of words or some bullets. So I'd like you to close your eyes. I want you to think for a minute and imagine the possibilities. I'm going to throw in dream big. How many of you know what your ideal job would be, or your ideal life would be? The secret to having it all is believing you already do. So I want you to imagine that you already have it. Anybody want to share? I saw your hand.
I caught myself in a loop of deciding, usually you think about things, right? I want this, I want that, I want the other thing, and it'll all be great right there. But then you think, okay, then what would I do? I know me, I'm always wanting to do stuff. So I don't know if it's more the destination or more of some other kind of alignment. I don't have an answer to it, but that's what it took me to.
As I was driving here listening to a book on tape, I want to quote, "The journey is the destination, so keep on your journey." So be inspired to take a risk and imagine your future. On that note, I say thank you.
Thank you.